Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, welcome to another talk on the YouTube station called Sufi Ibrahim Krebs. All these talks are around the subject of Sufism, and today we're going to cover a very important subject, the subject of spiritual methodology. Okay, so last week we had 3 terms, and this week I always forget to put the timer on so I know how long it is. Okay, so last week we had 3 terms, and this week we're going to have 3 terms. Okay, last week 3 terms were, should we ask Hadi, who graciously accompanies me?
So there's, I know in English, I keep forgetting.
Say it in English.
So there's, it's on the tip of my tongue, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It starts with
Tawakul.
Tawakkul, yes.
Which is trust in Allah.
Yeah.
Taslim. And tafweed. Okay. Tawakkul is trust in Allah. Taslim is surrender to Allah. And tafweed is handing over your authority to Allah. Okay, that's a new one for me, tafweed, but I like the idea. You let go and let God. Let go of your nafs, your will, your desire, your reason, and let God do the job. He does it much better, actually. So last week was about trust in God. This week is more about how do you get to the realization of divine consciousness, of God, of the absolute, whatever Christ consciousness, whatever people like to call it. And we have 3 terms this week. Dhikr, that most of you have probably heard about. Taffakur, which you probably have heard less about. And lastly, Aql, which you can't avoid hearing about. Okay, we'll treat that last. It's the most prone to confusion. So we'll start with Dhikr. Okay. Dhikr is translated as remembering God, okay, or bringing God to mind. I like that phraseology. Bringing God to mind, becoming aware of God, evoking the presence of God. Dhikr. Okay, that's the term that the Sufis use. And we have individual dhikr and we have collective dhikr, which is more controversial. So what are the dhikrs of the Sufis? Well, the ones that are most used nowadays, that were promulgated by, again, Sufi tariqat, the one that was most used was
La ilaha illallah.
La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah, the one true God. La ilaha illallah. And the Sufis would do this over and over again. Sheikh Nazim told us that Grand Sheikh on his retreats, he would do it 99,000 times, or 99,999 times a day. Give it a try. They were intense in those days. So 99,000 times La ilaha illallah. Then he would drink a cup or 2 of Turkish tea, 7 olives, and go back to fasting. Don't try it on your own. Don't try it at home. Okay? They were hardy people in those days. And he would do his ghusl, I think once a day, or maybe more, they were in Dagestan, there were lots of mountains and snow. With melted snow, he would melt it into water and do his bathing. Sheikh Nazim was good at imitating. Okay, so that's the La ilaha illallah, and it's classical for almost all the tariqats. Okay, including the Naqshbandis, the Qadiris, the Chistis, the Suharwardis, all of them, they did La ilaha illallah. But then, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a famous Shadali Wali named Ahmad al-Alawi from Mustaghanam. I visited his maqam with my eldest daughter. It's a lovely place. Sheikh Ahmad al-Alawi, the Sufi saint of the 20th century. The book by Martin Links. Two who attained, it's a better book. Two who attained, one of those two is Ahmad al-Alawi. And what I believe he was starting it, maybe the sheikh before him, they would do just, instead of La ilaha illallah, they simplified it to Allah. Allah. To the end of the breath. Allah. And what I've been led to understand is that there would, in the Zawiya where the Sufis met, 24 hours a day, 24/7, 365, there will be someone reciting the name of Allah aloud. Allah. Allah. And at times they would do the same thing but I don't think it was as systematic in Erdef in southwest Tunisia, where I used to go visit Sheikh Abu Qasim. Okay, so that became more or less the mainstay, at least of the Shadalis, and 3 of the Shadali sheikhs that I followed all did that practice. Allah. Please note here, I can't give you specific practices and details because that requires supervision. People have been known to go psychotic on these practices, and you'll hear lots of Sufi stories. They become majdoobs, they become majnoons, as they say in Arabic, crazy, by doing it too often. So you need to do this under supervision. I don't recommend anyone to do it alone. Sheikh Nu said you can do it for 6 times Allah after your prayer, but no more. If you do too much, you might get into a bad position and not know how to get out of it. So if you want to do it, you need to have a sheikh who will instruct you and guide you and help you if you get into trouble. Okay, so those are the classic dhikr. Then there's also the dhikr of the names. According to the Sufis and the Muslims, Allah has 99 names, 99 beautiful names, and you can do the dhikr of any of those as well at any time. Ya Haq, Ya Kareem, Ya Halim, Allah Ya Rahman, you can do those at any time. And you could use those specifically as healing practices if you're having some physical problem. Ya Shafi is the healer. Ya Rahman is the compassionate one. Ya Rahim is another name of compassion for the specific people who are doing the practices, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that's the overall picture. Now let's see a bit. So we're on the first term, dhikr. Let's see what our guide here, who is Kushairi, who brings up, these are the letters of Kushairi, a great Sufi and scholar, and he has some quotes, some of what some of the saints have said about dhikr. We'll just read a couple and comment. So first, all the Sufis start with the Quran and the Hadith. The Messenger of God said, "Have I not told you of the best of your works and attested to it before your king being Allah, and exalted it in your ranks? It is better than the gift of gold and silver, or encountering your enemies and beheading them." Ooh, okay. Don't take that too literally. It's metaphorical. While they are beheading you. Okay. The war analogies are inevitable because that's what was going on at the time. What is that, O Messenger of Allah? They asked the Sufis. The remembrance of God. Okay. So the highest order of practice is dhikr, remembrance of Allah. And you can do it anytime in any position. The Quran says, Alladhi yathkurunu kaiman wa ku'udan wa ala junubihim. So they do dhikr standing, sitting, and lying back or lying on their sides. You could do dhikr in any position. You could do dhikr while you're waiting in line at the grocery store or at the movie theater or at a government office. You can do dhikr anywhere. The Qasimis tell a story when they were in Saudi Arabia doing Umrah, and they were waiting at the airport and waiting, and the Murids were getting more and more restless and complaining about the inefficiency of the Saudi airport authorities. And the Sheikh reproached them and said, there's no room for us ever getting impatient, just do dhikr. You can do it for hours, days on end. Dhikr, the practice of remembering God, is a strong pillar in the way of the truth. Indeed, it is the mainstay of the way. No one attains to God except through continuous remembrance. Okay. There are some caveats there. Okay. This is the best way we know is to keep saying the name of God. Some people just attain by the grace of God. There's something we'll get into, hopefully, before we finish, is that this is all the active aspects that we're teaching, but there's an element, we should cover that right now actually, there's an element where ultimately the ultimate result is from Allah. So the ultimate result is from your position of receptivity, not from your position of activity. Okay. Everything that happens is with the permission of Allah and from the grace of Allah. So many of us have had have had realization when we weren't doing very much, and then we do a lot more and more and more, and nothing's happening. You know, many Sufi stories. 20, 30 years, nothing's happening. Because ultimately, it's all from the rahmat, or the Christians would say the grace of Allah. That is where the result comes from, not from your efforts. But you make your efforts at the same time. A famous hadith of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you see the gardens of paradise, feast in them. He was asked, what are the gardens of paradise? And he said, the congregations for remembrance. Oh, Wahhabis! Time to start shouting bid'ah, shirk, kufr. Why? The congregations of remembrance. The collective dhikr. When we wanted to do our Wisal, which is a collective dhikr, there's not a mosque in Montreal that will host us. Even one run by a Turkish Sufi. He's afraid of his congregation. So we're now doing the gardens, which are the congregations of remembrance at a church. Shame on the Muslims for this situation. Shame on them for not acknowledging the deepest part, the most subtle part, the most sublime part of their religion, and they're criticizing it. Why? Because they become empiricists, people of the outer. The way of Islam is in the inner, not in the outer. Allah even says in the Quran, I don't look at your outer, I look at your heart, I look at the inner aspects. But the Muslims in modern time, they've lost a lot of this, unfortunately. And everyone is looking at the outer. What is the length of your mustache? How perfect is your hijab? You know, how many times has someone come up to me and said, your wudu isn't perfect? You know, this is what they're concerned with, not with the heart. Astaghfirullah. This is not the way of our religion. This is not the way of our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's certainly not the way of the Sufis. So the Muslims, and we'll come back to this when we talk a little bit about Aql, because the Muslims have largely fallen prey to the waves of modernism. And part of the waves of there are two waves that are particularly important in modernism. One is the wave of empiricism, only the outward is important. And the other is the way of rationalism, the Aristotelian logic. Those are two waves of modernism, and the Muslims have swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Astaghfirullah, may Allah show them the true way and forgive them. I was laughing because just yesterday I was in court trying to contest a parking ticket, and the judge, who wasn't a bad guy, tough judge. I knew everything I said was subjective, unreliable, hearsay. But I know a little bit about how this legal system. I had taken 2 pictures of the situation, and when he saw the pictures, he said, "Oh, okay, I get." Nothing I said, I could have explained to him exactly. He would have understood. Nothing I said counts. It's subjective. How many times have you heard that in your science classes at the university? We need objective evidence. How many times have you heard in your doctor's office, well, your tests are fine, you must, but doctor, I'm in pain, it's burning, I can't sleep, look, your tests are fine, madam, it's all in your head. These are all the curses of empiricism. I'm still waiting for someone to understand what I'm saying about that, but eventually. I'm not surprised at the doctors, but I'm more surprised at the Muslims, especially those who are Sufis. There's still a lot of empiricism out there, that it's only the outward. You know, when the Muslim father comes to marry his daughter, he checks. What does he check with the candidate? The one who wants to marry. Does he check his character? Nah. Does he check his piety? Minimally. Do you do your prayer? Okay, good enough. How much is in your bank account? What are you earning at work? What are your professional prospects? This is all empiricism. No idea, not a clue about how many women have I seen whose families in Muslim world, whose families married them to more or less of a shaitan, an abuser for sure, because the family had money and he had a good job and he was earning well or had the prospects of earning well. Oh, there's a good guy. No! The real marieux, they called them in French. The real people who could marry people are those who can see character. Nah, who's interested in that? We want to see your bank account. We're like the TD Bank. We want to see how much balance you have, how much revenue, what the revenue flow is like, what the cost. Then we'll decide whether my daughter is the appropriate partner for you. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Really, this is a sickness. One of the special features of the practice of remembrance is that it has no assigned time, as we said before, and no assigned place. You can do it anywhere. Indeed, there is no moment in which a servant is not commanded to the remembrance of God. So we're supposed to be always, of course we're going to slip, but as soon as we slip, we can go back to remember. When we get up in the morning, we're supposed to say, Hasbi Allah wa la ilaha illahu. Tawakkultu alayhi wa huwa rabbul arshil azim. So we're already saying Hasbi Allah, Allah is sufficient. We remember Allah when we get up in the morning. If you do this practice, it'll get you started. Remember Allah when you get up in the morning. Not where's my coffee machine. For me, that's number 2. But that's another thing. First thing, remember Allah. Thank Allah for another day. And before you go to bed, do some practice of gratitude. And then say a few ayats from the Quran. You can check it up in the fiqh, which are the recommended ones. The ayat al-Kursi is one of them. And remember Allah before you go to sleep. Okay, we could go on for days about dhikr, but let's try to, and we'll probably come back to it for sure. But let's try to go into the second term is taffakur. Okay, taffakur, everything in Arab, most things in Arabic come from a 3-letter root, fakara, which means to think and reflect. So tafakkur is probably best translated as contemplation. Now, there's a whole field of study in Christianity called Christian contemplation. And in a way, it was lost. It's really the spiritual methodology of the Christians. In a way, it was lost because they became also people of the outward. So what was important is you said it in Latin, or you did the sacraments perfectly, or whatever, and they lost the inner. But but there were times in the past where they were more contemplative. Okay, I'm objecting to the term because I think the term is, in terms of what we understand by contemplation, it's a little bit misleading. It should be called spiritual prayer. They have a number of interesting terms for it now. They call it the prayer of the heart, or the centering prayer, the hesychast prayer. Those were the fathers of the desert. A lot of different names. And what it is basically it's a dhikr. Okay, like in Islam, it's a remembrance. And then there are particular practices you can do around that remembrance. And there are a few people, maybe some of you have heard of them, that have been very important in the development of taffakur, of contemplative practice in Christianity. They include someone, I was just watching his tape, very interesting, Thomas Keating. Most of them are monks. Then there was Merton. Was he also a Thomas? Yeah, lots of Thomases there. Thomas Keating, Thomas Merton, and John Main was very important in the Montreal area where I live. He brought in a prayer, contemplative prayer, centering prayer into the Christian community, and a lot of people joined him. They had an organization called Unitas. Unfortunately, he died early, and they're having trouble maintaining it. But they're all trying to bring back these contemplative practices into Christianity, so Christianity can have a spiritual domain. Now, one of the things I like about the Christians, and there's much less of this amongst the Muslims, unfortunately, is that they're willing to learn from other people. So Thomas Keating, who was an abbot of a Catholic monastery, he used to bring in Zen Buddhists to teach them how to meditate. And in fact, he was on the right path, because if you start studying this deeply, you'll see that the Buddhists and the Hindus have had a longer time, and their practices are more sophisticated, more subtle. They're not their theology, not their beliefs. There's a lot of problems, you can read about it in some of my books, in their theology. And Thomas Keating says this also. So we didn't take on their theology, but we took on some of their methodology because it helped us get closer to God and closer to Jesus and more spiritual. So they were willing to learn from the Zen Buddhists. And I learned from the Buddhists. I still learn from the Buddhists. Okay, I started out my path with a Tibetan Buddhist, and then more recently I've been following some of the schools of mindfulness. They have some good ideas, and it's complementary to us in Islam. The Prophet said, peace be upon him, our Prophet said, all knowledge belongs to the Muslims, but now the only knowledge that belongs to the Muslims is Islamic sciences, ilm al-Islamiyya, and they get, unfortunately, narrow in their vision, and then there's all kinds of other things they can't see once you're in that narrowness. Okay. So that's the contemplative way. Now, my idea of contemplation, I think the Christians have, I don't know, their term is now outdated. I wouldn't call them contemplative practices. I would call them spiritual practices, meditative practices. Why? Because contemplation is a specific act, and a useful one, and one that maybe can reconcile you somewhat, because people are so attached to their mental formations, to their thought processes, to their mind productions, it's hard for them to give it up. So if you can't give it up, we're going to give you like the vaping of contemplation, the vaping of thinking. Okay, so it's not as harmful as smoking. Allahu Akbar. Okay, so what am I referring to here? My idea of contemplation, if you're trying to solve a problem, okay, you start thinking about it. Okay? You focus in on it. You'll see all the scientists, this is what they did. They were thinking, whether it was Archimedes or Leonardo da Vinci or any of the people, Einstein, if you read it, he'll tell you. They think and they think and they write equations on the board and everything, and they keep focusing in on the problem. You can do this with almost anything. Even one of your symptoms that you can't work out and the doctors can't work. Keep focused, and then what will happen is Allah will send you an inspiration, an ilham, or a tajalli. Those are the Arabic words. Ilham, inspiration, tajalli, a descent, and then suddenly, I get it. Okay, that's it. That's how Archimedes figured out how to measure the weight of water, and other people realized, and Einstein got his theory of relativity, etc., etc., etc. You'll find this in all kinds of areas of science. They think and they think and they think, and then suddenly, outside of all the thinking, the answer drops. And there you are. The solution is there. Then you have to work and operationalize the solution. That's a whole other business. Okay, so that's contemplation. You think about something, you don't take your thoughts seriously. This is not data accumulation and then rational, logical extensions from that data. That's what the modern world does. It's not that. It's think about something, the inspiration comes, and you act on it. If the politicians in charge were able to do that, a lot of our problems would have been solved a long time ago. Instead, they accumulate more and more data, research, commission d'enquête, inquiries, royal commissions, and nothing gets better, as happened in the Canadian medical system. So many studies and experts and data, à finir, as the French say, never-ending data and no solutions, because they're not watching out for their ilham, for their genuine divine inspiration. God forbid they said this is divine inspiration. They say, oh, you're crazy, get out of here. Okay, so that's taffakur. Again, there's a lot more that could be said. Okay, the last term I want to deal with, because the Muslims particularly are so attached to aql. They said, no, Dr. Ibrahim, you can't be right. Reason is so useful. The Quran tells us it to think. Okay. I knew they were wrong, but because I know people are overthinking, and it's getting everyone into problems. So I looked back at it, the Quran, where the word aql is used. By the way, this is a complete LOL, for those who know the acronyms, laughing out loud. If you go to the Arabic dictionary and you look up the root word for aql, Ain, Kaf, Lam, what is the first meaning that comes out? Hadi?
To tie down.
To hobble or to tie down an animal. Think about it. That's what they're trying to tell us is the source of all knowledge. The aql, the intellect. The first meaning is to be tied down, to be hobbled. And that's exactly what the intellect does. Watch those people. If anyone wants to watch those presidents of elite universities in the United States, Harvard, MIT, University of Pennsylvania, they're hobbled. Watch them in the congressional hearings if you want to see people who are hobbled. And the universities are full of them. Hobbled people, hobbled by their intellect. So let's see, how does maybe I'm wrong, maybe Allah's telling us this is the way to truth. So they say, no, aql is, first of all, aql is in the Quran. The verb yakalun is in the Quran. Okay, not the actual. And what does Allah say? So let's read first of all from Ayat 164 in Surah Al-Baqarah. Behold, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternation of the night and day, in the sailing of the ships through the ocean, etc., 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 the beasts of all kind, of course, evolution explains that, and all the things that are scattered through the earth, and the clouds between the sky and the earth, indeed are signs, they're ayat, for a people that are literally, if you translate it, he says that are wise, but it's a wrong translation here. There's nothing about wisdom is hakim. This is yakulun, for people who reflect. Okay, this is the akal. The source word is akal. So all of these things, the sky, the night and day, the earth, these are all signs for people. Is this analytic thinking? Is this scientific? No, the scientists have, the animals, they're from random mutation and selective and natural selection after random mutation. That's the animal. The sky, this is just the moisture that's dissipating from the seas going up to the sky given a certain temperature. The lightning, no, that's just a positive pole and a negative pole, and the two are zapping together. If you listen to that, you'll get depressed. Nothing to be awed about, nothing to be impressed about. But no, the people who think, not the people who think, the people who have insight, the people who can see, I thought of a better term, the people who get it. They don't get it through rational empirical analysis. They get it through insight, through basira, through the heart. I think one of the people in one of our Sufi groups was saying this is how he came to Islam. He could see in the night and the day and the light and the sun and the moon, he could see the hand of Allah. And he didn't see that by analyzing how many miles the sun is and how much heat it produces and how the clouds form and all that. No, he could see it. So what we want is seeing, not thinking. Thinking creates confusion and opaqueness. So in case you're not convinced, let's do one more, just so you see that this is the only way akal is used in the Quran, as far as if anyone has any contrary evidence, you can show me. So in the next surah, 3, 4, okay, same story, okay. Then those who reject faith in the signs of Allah, okay, before this as a guide, there's no God. Then he's talking here about the book, sent down the criterion, the book. Then those who reject, this is Surah 3, Ayat 4, those who reject faith in the signs of Allah, okay, these are all the signs of Allah, outside in nature, will suffer the severest penalty. Okay, I'm not on the right. 13, sorry. That was about another subject. Let's go to 13.4. It's all more or less the same. 13.4. Okay. And it is he, no. And the earth are tracts neighboring, and gardens of vines, fields with corn, palm trees, watered with water, more excellent, yet some of them we make. Behold, verily in these things there are signs for those who understand. Yeah, okay, there you got the word right. Those who understand are signs. Okay, so when you see the palm trees and the vines, and you see the water coming down from the sky, you see the signs. This is not thinking. The rational intellect doesn't see any of this. The rational intellect says, well, the average temperature in Montreal in February is -5. We know by empirical analysis. Doesn't see the alternations. Yes, the summer is different from the winter in terms of the temperature and the precipitation type, etc. And this is because the water reaches a certain temperature, it crystallizes and becomes snow. That's their level of understanding, which can be summarized as blindness, opaqueness, foolishness. Okay? So akal is actually in this sense intellect in the sense of actual inner vision, of seeing, not in the sense of rational empirical thought. Okay, I hope that will clarify it. I'm sure the Muslims who are still overwhelmed with the findings of the age of rationalism and scientific inquiry will still have trouble with this, but Allah is not asking us, sorry, we're just lost something here. What am I doing wrong? Okay, sorry about that. The computer's playing tricks on me. Allahu Akbar. Okay, so dhikr, remembering God, taffakur, contemplating, thinking about God, waiting for Him to reveal Himself, and akal, in the sense of inner seeing, not in the sense of overusing your mind. There's lots about that on my blog, SufiPilgrimsProgress.com. If you want to see anything about the illusions of the mind, read Vedanta. If you don't like reading stuff about Islam, it's all in Vedanta. In Buddhism, it's everywhere. It's just the Western religions that have been confused. They've been confused by the Greek philosophers for over 2,000 years. First the Talmudists in Judaism, then the theologians in Christianity, and now the ulama of Islam have all been confused by Greek philosophy into missing the point. And the point is not here, it's here, in the heart and the soul. That's what the Sufis are aiming at. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, salamun al mursalin, alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, al-Fatiha.